Today we are here with Alexis Ohanian. He's a UVA graduate and the co-founder of Reddit, and he's here to promote his new book, Without Their Permission. Alexis, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to come back to when you first came here to UVA and how you met your co-founder. I know you met him in old dorms, I believe?
Yeah, Hancock first left. Steve Huffman was there. I'll never forget, it was move-in day. He was there, he was playing Gran Turismo on his PS2, which is not my favorite game, but whatever, he was playing it. And I was so excited, because like, here's this dude who is such a dork, such a nerd, he's a gamer just like me. Like that's all I did in grade school with my friends, and I was worried that no one in college played video games. So I saw him, and I just so happened to introduce myself. And he was much less happy to see me, because he had seen my name, Alexis, on the door across the hall and thought I was a girl and that he was living on a co-ed hall. So he was disappointed. But we hit it off, and before long we were talking about the computers we had built and our gaming PCs and all the stuff we were doing. And yeah, at the time I didn't think it was very. I didn't think it was going to have nearly the effect on my life that it did, right? It's just some random person I met on move-in day who I got along with. And we became friends, and within a few years, we started talking about working on projects together and starting a company together, and here we are.
Great. So I know that initially when you came in, you probably didn't think of entrepreneurship as a career or something you wanted to pursue. What did you come in thinking you were going to do, and how did that transition kind of happen for you?
So if you look on the old, I think we still had Facebooks when I was in college. If you look at the freshman, I forget what it was called here, the first year something.
Faces, the first year faces.
First year faces?
Like that, yeah.
And if you look, you'll see my dorky headshot, and it says pre-med was I think interests were like, I don't think they asked for interest, and it was like computers, and the major was pre-med. I lasted a week there in doing pre-med because I signed up for the wrong science class. I took intro to bio instead of intro to chem, and when I showed up in this massive auditorium, the professor on the first day was like, hey, so just to be sure, how many of you have taken intro to chem here at UVA? And every hand goes up except for mine. And he was like, well, good, because if you haven't, you really should, and you should probably leave. And I got up and left. And I signed up for the most interesting class I could find, which was ancient Greece. It was a history class by Professor Lendon, and I fell in love. I took, within 2 classes of ancient Greece, I was declaring my major. Like first semester, first year, I declared my history major because I was so in love. I'd always liked history, and I just was like, this is it. I got to do this. This is what I want to learn.
Awesome. So how did that, you ended up graduating with a history major. How did that turn into, starting Reddit?
So it's interesting. The moment when I realized I wanted to be an entrepreneur was the moment I walked out of that LSAT prep course here at UVA and went over to Waffle House. In the now, I hope, semi-famous story. I really hope that Waffle House gets people coming into it who are like, yeah, Reddit got started here. Because that was the first time I really doubted myself as a lawyer, which is what I'd been working toward. Like I was obsessing over my GPA. And as a history major, it's a pretty common thing to do. And I just realized, 3 years, a lot of money, a lot of time, and you're gonna have to be a lawyer afterward. I should really, really want to do it. And that hesitation led to me just saying, no, you know what, forget it. I'm not gonna do history. I'm gonna figure something else out. And I had a professor at the comm school, so I was also in the comm school, and he invited me to Singapore for this thing one summer, the National University of Singapore, a technopreneurship conference, where the conference itself wasn't terribly helpful. I met some great friends actually, but on the first night, I went out with this professor and his wife for a drink, and pitched them on this idea that Steve and I had and were thinking about doing, and I hadn't yet convinced Steve to quit this job he had with a software company. Already lined up, he was working every summer, but they gave me the first really honest feedback on it. I already told my parents, but they were just extremely supportive, and it's helpful, but it's not honest, objective feedback.
Sure.
And we pitched him on this idea of My Mobile Menu, or which is this food ordering service that you could use from your mobile device. Back then it was not the smartest phones on the market, but we didn't want people to wait in line. We wanted to be able to text in an order, essentially, and have it waiting for you when you showed up. And he actually thought, he was like, that's not a bad idea. I think you should give this a go. And I wrote Steve this email the next morning that was like, I need you, I need your commitment, like I can't do this without you, let's start this company together. And was able to talk him into it, talk him out of that job at that software company and into starting a company with me. And at this point, you know, my dad was a travel agent who started his own agency when I was in high school. And I saw what the internet did to his industry. I saw how much it pissed him off because it put a lot of travel agents out of business. Fortunately, my dad adapted and he's still running it. But I wanted to be on the right side of that disruption. I wanted to be, you know, I wanted to at least be aware of the internet and what it was going to do and hopefully use it in whatever field I pursued. But there I was in college realizing, all right, I'm just going to hack a career together with Steve. Like, we're going to try to start this thing. We're going to, you know, we're going to just figure stuff out. And it was around that time that I finally started thinking about entrepreneurship as a viable path. You know, and like I said, I'd always had my dad in the back of my head as an example, as a role model, but his business, you know, it's a small travel agency in Western Maryland, is very different than a startup.
Sure.
But, oh right, and the other book that helped, called Masters of Doom, which is about the founding of id, software which invented the first-person shooter genre, Wolfenstein, Doom, Quake. There was a book that Steve had lent me, second or third year, that really, Chris, that was the last, like, that was where I could say, here's some people I really admire who did some amazing, I was a hardcore gamer, who did some world-changing stuff, and they just seemed like dudes who were living in a house eating pizza, and they've built world-changing software. So all of this stuff kind of happening, circling around, even though, you know, I tried enrolling for an entrepreneurship class at UVA, at the McIntyre School, and I was not allowed into it. I go through the email exchange in the book that I had with this professor, and I don't spite this professor. It was a really interesting lesson to be learned because, you know, this was a hypothetical entrepreneurship class. You'd start a fake company with some other students, and I'd already incorporated an LLC. Like, Steve and I were already doing this. It wasn't hypothetical. It was like, this was our life. And ultimately, she said the only way I could get in the class was if I brought on like co-founders from the class to be a part of my company if I really wanted to use my company, which is again not hypothetical, like a real company. I was like, I'm not randomly taking on co-founders just for the purpose of a class, like for my real company. And anyway, so it didn't work out. They wouldn't even let me audit it. They wouldn't even let me just sit in the classroom quietly. But you know what? Entrepreneurship's not really about necessarily you know, taking entrepreneurship 101. It's just about doing. And so before long, we're on a train up to Boston to hear Paul Graham's How to Start a Startup talk during our senior year spring break. And that was, in a lot of ways, that was the motivation for this tour that I'm doing. Because that's the talk that I was lucky enough to get because I was in the right place at the right time. I want that tour to come to, 75 universities across the country because it really, it connected a lot of dots for me. And we met with Paul after, pitched him the idea. He said he liked it. He said he didn't hate it. No, I think he was pretty excited. And applied to Y Combinator when it was announced a few weeks later. First time ever, like this new thing, Y Combinator. They'll give you money to start your startup and work for 3 months and build something to get a next level of funding. And we got rejected from it. But the next morning they called us back and they said, we like you, we just don't like the idea. So if you're willing to change the idea, we'll let you in. And we go on a train right back to Boston and start talking to Paul about solving a problem we have. And it was Reddit. And then that's how it all got started. And I will point out, because I'm here at UVA, the Reddit alien was doodled while I was bored in McIntyre in class. I doodled it in a little corner, went home and converted it in Photoshop. Actually, it was PaintShop Pro 5. It was a cracked copy of PaintShop Pro 5.
Was Photoshop even...
It was Photoshop around. Yeah. Look at this. Of course Photoshop was around, man.
All right.
Damn, how old do you think I am? No, I just didn't have it. And then what was the other? Oh, right, and the name, Reddit. That I registered that domain name in Alderman Library. So
nice.
Yeah, UVA. There's a lot tied up here in Charlottesville around Reddit.
Well, I guess for a lot of students, they might face difficulties when talking to their parents about, I want to go out and do this thing, as opposed to, maybe going to comm school or maybe pursuing more. Some
parents like I do.
Yeah, something like, So I guess what would you recommend for students maybe in that position who, maybe are facing challenges from their family, from those around him who are, doubting their ability to go out and do that?
I mean, okay. when I think of the risk that comes with entrepreneurship, like let's really think about that for a second. Like especially if you're doing it in tech, right? One of the biggest risks in entrepreneurship historically was tied into the capital that you needed. And so, banks still don't loan to people. But in theory, you would have maybe gone to a bank to get a loan to get that, to get the first office space, you get the restaurant, I don't know, whatever you need. The physical stuff that required it.
Sure.
And there were costs associated with that. And you hear the stories of people maxing out their credit cards and going through taking on all this debt to start their company. The biggest risk you have starting a company online, when your biggest expenses are just your shelter and your food, like your servers. In 2006 when we sold Reddit, and obviously costs have changed a lot since then. Our three biggest expenses in descending order were rent, food, and servers. And this is when server costs were more expensive because we had to buy servers, take them to a colo facility. You guys can just take out a credit card and have servers running. It's amazing how much easier and cheaper it's gotten now. And we spent, I think it was $1,500 a month in rent in Boston for our 3-bedroom. And that was the biggest expense every month. And so put that in perspective. If that's all you need to start and sustain your company, you can take this risk, which really just means, say, let's spending a year or a year and a half or 2 years starting something. And the worst case scenario, you haven't incurred a ton of extra debt. You haven't, you've basically learned a ton. You've gotten a chance to start a company and do all kinds of things. And when you go back into the workforce, if you want to go get a real job, right? Afterwards, what do you think is going to impress a recruiter more than, I spent the last 2 years running a company? You're getting an education. I mean, when I think of MBAs, it just seems so ridiculous because you're spending 2 years and a lot of money to make some connections and get drunk and read some case studies, right? But you could spend way less money. You could take that same amount of money, invest it in yourself, in a company, and have a much better, even if it's a total failure, even have a much better outcome. Because you show me 2 candidates and assuming she is the exact same person on every other metric, except one she went to get an MBA, Harvard, wherever, or Darden, and one, where she started a company and it failed. But let's say, as long as she wasn't being irresponsible with the failure, as long as it was a lesson learned and she wasn't just we spent all the money on booze and didn't give a damn, right? Assuming they were a reasonable person, that candidate is way more interesting to me. That is way more helpful for me as an employer or as an investor, because then I see, all right, you actually did stuff. You actually spent the last year, 2 years doing stuff. And when I look at all that, I think it's actually not that risky. It's actually not that bad. When you have nothing, I mean, you have nothing to lose, right? And when you're a college student, your cost of living is so well adjusted to being frugal, which is a core tenet of starting any venture, right? It's important you stay cheap in a startup, and it's really easy when you've been doing it for the last 4 years as a college student.
Sure.
So you also have a nice transition too.
Great. So I guess I wanted to talk about the book a little bit. Without their permission, what do you mean by whose permission do you not need anymore? What does that mean for students today or for young professionals today?
So it comes from this idea of permissionless innovation, which it's pretty prevalent within tech, and it's the reason the internet is so empowering is because you don't need permission to go create your company. You don't need permission to go start your photo blog. You can just do it. And what this low barrier to entry, I mean, it's non-existent barrier to entry means, is far more creativity, far more innovation, because people can just create. And what I'm thinking about here are the traditional gatekeepers. And, think about this, right? If you wanted to create something like Reddit, something that could be as influential, it's a social media property, right? But only on the internet can 2 UVA grads with no connections, with an internet connection, and no relationships, up in a suburb of Boston, although started in Seville, with limited funding, be able to start something with just a couple computers that has more influence, arguably, but certainly more reach than the New York Times in 8 years, right? There's no, how could you, it's just impossible. If you wanted to create the next CNN, if you wanted to create the next New York Times, like these things cost a lot of money and take a lot of time and resources and connections and all that stuff. And the promise of the internet means you can just get started and do it. And this is now affecting and rippling out into other industries. It's not just for entrepreneurs who want to start businesses. It's for philanthropists, it's for activists, it's for artists. And I wanted to create a kind of blueprint and almost manifesto for anyone with that great idea to take it to the world using the internet without their permission. Yeah.
So, throughout your tour, I know you talked about this a bit last night. You've noticed that there's been, just in the years since you've been here, a vast change in resources that are available for students, even at universities, who are interested in starting their own things. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of the changes you've seen since you've been here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're sitting in the middle of it. Something like HackCville, I wish I'd had something like HackCville when Steve and I were here, because, and this is why I always tell. I tell everyone this, everyone in y'all's age group, right? Any of y'all in college right now, how jealous I am, just because there are more resources online now than, the resources are so much better, right? I was saying last night, right? YouTube did not exist when I was in college. And now you take for granted how you can watch a lesson from Sal Khan about algebra and then quickly jump over to a TED Talk from one of the greatest speakers alive, like Hans Rosling, and then quickly dump over to Udacity and take a course from Steve, who built Reddit, teaching you computer science. Like, that's amazing. That is amazing. And so we were standing on the shoulders of giants. You all are standing on the shoulders of giants, and that's in the online world. Now let's take it to offline. Here in Charlottesville, I lived in Alderman Library, and I loved it there. I got a lot of work done there. I had my little Alderman Library posse. But I would have given anything to have had a place like this to come to work after class, because as much as I love Alderman, it's such a wide range of people, and it's great. Don't get me wrong. You get to bump into some random student working on some random thing and have an interesting conversation about some random whatever, right? And that's interesting. But to be able to have a place that I could hop into where everyone was thinking about building stuff and doing stuff, it just helps. Right? We're all learning from each other, and it hurts me to think about all the knowledge that is wasted in the world because you are solving a problem that I solved 2 weeks ago. Like, sure. Think about that. Like, yeah. It'll really depress you when you think about all the problems that people have solved or are resolving that have been solved before just because they didn't get access to the knowledge at the right time. And the internet's helped make a lot of that more efficient, right? Thanks to, you can run a Google search, you go on Stack Exchange. But nothing beats just bumping into someone and being like, oh yeah, it could be as simple as, oh, where do you get your t-shirts printed? Or, I'm trying to figure out how to reskin my WordPress and something in my CSS isn't working. Like, can you give me just 2 seconds of your time? Sure. This stuff makes such a difference. And like I said, I'm jealous of it. And I'm so happy to exist here. And I've been telling, we were telling President Sullivan last night about how important places like this are. And I know it's not affiliated with the university, which I also told her is great. I was like, all you have to do is just talk it up. You don't have to mess with it. Just let it be. The university should still be devoting resources. Joe, what was the name of the? Open Grounds, right? Yeah. So it's so the university is making resources possible, and it's so cool because they've got crew at Open Grounds who are teaching spot welding to students who want to just build stuff. And so the university is putting together resources of their own to create these spaces, and it's great because I think it's well, one, it's not a zero-sum game, right? None of this is competitive with each other. I think it's just so much healthier to have a vibrant ecosystem of all this cool stuff and get people thinking not just about the amazing stuff they learn in class, but applying the amazing stuff they're learning in class to making. And more of these spaces, the better, man. And I really feel like HackCville is one of the first that I've seen to just really do this and run with it. And it's been great. I was here a year ago, and to see already how much you guys have gotten new rooms and everything. I was joking, I was expecting you guys to take over this whole street in another 10 years.
Great. Well, hey, Alexis, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.